in this episode of Shotmaker, we really wanted to go back and talk about mindset. So I think the whole idea of Shotmaker really came out of COVID, right? The idea was you had two businesses, similar businesses. They're both in New York City. They're both in California. They're both incredibly shut down. And you have one business that's able to pivot. They're able to adapt, right? And you have another one that's really struggling to see a path forward. And what I noticed was so much of that was truly the mindset of the owner, the mindset of the management team, and not in a bad way, but just there were some people who really struggled to see a path forward. So what we want to do today is kind of go back to that idea of how much mindset impacts our day-to-day life, and starting with, the COVID times. So Scott, share with us a couple of things that you saw during COVID as it relates to mindset.
I mean, it changed everything. I mean, I think you walked in, if you want to specific on the restaurant industry, you walked in one day and you walked in the next day and it was completely different. I mean, it was, right? I mean, there was no people sitting in restaurants anymore. It was completely everything out the door, takeout. The unknown was the biggest difference, right? And all of the people, even the best restaurant operators that were so used to planning and forecasting, you just threw those out because they didn't mean anything anymore. And then the mindset was, well, what's tomorrow going to be? I can either say, hey, I'm going to try to figure it out with the data I have. I'm going to bring in a really great attitude, and I'm going to try to translate that attitude to the people working with me. Or I'm going to just send the white flag and say, I can't do this.
Right. Unfortunately, a lot of people have done that, right? So in sports, everybody say 90% mental.
Yeah.
Any sport you play, right? Professional teams, a lot of them have psychiatrists on staff.
Yeah.
They get the players' minds in the right place. Their mindset has to be right. Same thing in business. Your mindset has to be right. How do you get there? What do you do? Right? I think that's the question.
Yeah, and I think that was for me, coming from a place of playing competitive golf. I mean, I had a sports psychologist, and I had never really thought of the similarity between competitive golf and business until March 2020, when all of a sudden you're like, wow, I mean, if I'm not careful, my mind is going to go a horrible direction, right? And
Right.
just thinking about the things that we have to learn about our mind and learn about visualization and seeing a positive path. And I think it's, a really good lesson that doesn't go away, that, as business owners, our mindset is incredibly important. And I think, what we wanted to do in this time is really assess where you are in your mindset, because I think as much as we'd like to say we're back here, right, we know that there's been inflation since then, there's been labor shortages, there's been labor changes. I mean, it's not like March 2020 was the bottom, right? Like we wish it was, but it just felt like it was just coming at us, right?
Right.
And continue to come at us. So I think it's a really important time to kind of just take that initial assessment, like where am I? And I think sports is such a valuable analogy, because the thing that, whether we love it or not, the athletes can't afford to not have their mind perfect, right? If their mind isn't right, you see it right away and you know it right away. Whereas I think in business, sometimes you can get away with it a little more because you're not, playing under a million people watching.
It takes a little longer to become noticeable.
Yes.
Right. It affects everything right away, but it's not noticed right away. Where in sports, notice right away. The
Yeah.
first game, everybody knows.
Yeah.
You got 200,000 people watching you. They're going to know.
Right. Yeah. So I guess as a starting point, I think what we wanted to talk about too is how your mindset also affects your team, right? Like even if it's a business team versus a sports team, that the owner's mindset really does impact the team. Scott, what do you think are some words about that?
Definitely. I mean, the leader, and in this case the owner, the energy they bring in, good or bad, is going to be contagious. I mean, they come in with a positive can-do attitude. We're gonna have a great day today. I think that's gonna trickle down to the the general manager, the kitchen staff, and everybody else in the building. Where opposite, they come in, they feel stressed, they look stressed, a negative attitude. I think that's also going to translate to that. And as we, any business we're in, you get to the customer service side, it's eventually going to suffer if that's the initial feeling of energy that's coming out from the top.
Yeah.
Like you said, it affects everyone, not only employees, but it's going to affect your customers as well. It's going to affect the work ethic. It's going to the environment of your restaurant. It's just going to send a bad tone. You want to be the energizer. You don't want to be, you don't want to be a receptacle that you're taking all that.
Right.
Right? Energize them. Be the energizer. You set your mind right. Prepare yourself for that. You should think about your day. Think about everything good, and hit the ground running.
Yeah. And, we definitely don't want to be, lecturing you here. So what we wanted to do was kind of talk about some teams that have gone through this, right? Because whether it's sports or business, this is something every team faces, right? There's no perfect. There's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be times your team has a bad vibe, times your team has a good vibe.
Right.
So I would say in golf, right, our biggest thing in terms of mental side is always the Ryder Cup, right? And usually, I hate to say it, the U.S. struggles. Right? We have a lot of ego, we have a lot of friction, we have a lot of I want the limelight, and it usually plays out with a really bad showing compared to the Europeans who kind of show up with a good vibe, they have a plan, they have execution,
They're proud.
less ego, and they get it done. But what would be some good sports examples of teams that have good vibes?
As Philadelphia fans, I think just the last year you can look at the Philadelphia Phillies, right? You had the same team, you changed managers a couple months into the season, and it wasn't even like, oh, we waited a few months to see improvement. It was instant. The run that they went on, and when they started interviewing people after, and they talk a lot about it, and I think people were trying to be politically correct and not throw someone on the bus, but it was in the dugouts was a different feeling that people weren't scared to fail. Especially with the young players they talked about. They were given opportunities. They knew they were going to get at-bats. They knew they were going to get a chance to keep playing. And if they made a mistake, it was okay. So I think it was just that the leadership part of it is, hey, this is our plan. We know that we're not always going to execute our plan, but we're going to do this, and we're going to do it as a team, and instant success. Obviously, they got the World Series. Didn't win, pretty close, but the difference from...
It was amazing where we went from out of the playoffs to in the playoffs to in the World Series.
Right.
Yeah.
All because of one person's mindset. That's what it came down to. Rob Thompson's mindset was contagious to the rest of the team.
Yeah.
And everyone knew they had a fair chance with him there.
Yeah.
So I think that was the biggest part. Then we want to talk about the other end of having egos.
Okay.
Right? One of the teams they played in the playoffs that was a favorite to go to the World Series. They got all these egos on the team. One of them's 24 years old, maybe top 5 in the league today.
He's definitely up there, right?
And he's on the trading blocks.
Right.
Because they're trying to fix this problem of all these egos. And as of right now, they're out of the playoffs this year. So their mindset is more about them than the team in a whole, right?
Yeah.
So your mindset needs to be for your team, your restaurant, not about you.
Yes.
So in a restaurant, you got to step back because you're busy and running, knock out some dishes. You'll do it because you got the right mindset.
Yeah.
These guys on this team, nobody's willing to take that step back and say, I'm not the third hitter.
Right.
I'm hitting third, you're not.
Right.
And there's this fight in between them, and they're all so good.
Yeah.
They're all Hall of Famers. They're going
Yeah.
to be Hall of Famers. But they can't play together
Yeah.
because of their mindset.
Yeah. And what a great analogy for any business owner, but especially in the restaurant, right? If you walk in, which I think is one of the things that we hope that you will do as an action item after listening to this, if you walk in your team on a Friday night and you just feel like friction, right? Like you just feel this vibe, it's interesting to think, is that coming from some leadership, right? Is that
Right.
coming from a manager? Is it coming from, the back of house, the chef? Like, is there something that's causing that friction?
It usually is.
And look at the difference in performance if we find and correct, that behavior.
Definitely. I mean, in a lot of the restaurants that I worked in, different teams, the most success we had wasn't the time that we probably had the most talented team of managers, which was always kind of funny, and use that example a lot. When we had newer managers, that wasn't always our best team. Our best teams were the ones that really worked together. They really wanted to develop the next person up. They really wanted to win as a team, and it wasn't maybe solely, I want to get promoted or I want to do this. So I think that definitely translates into that team environment and success.
Through my career of putting management teams together, I always did it like it was a sports team.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, you can't have all superstars, right? Gotta have, everyone's gotta be able to feed off each other. You're good at this position, you're good at this position, you're good at this position. Most importantly, you have the right mindset, you're all team players.
Yeah.
That's what you need. If you have a superstar at every position, they're just gonna fight each other, like
Yeah.
San Diego Padres.
Yeah.
All of them just fight each other.
Yeah.
So, when you do this, you just make sure that everybody fits and everybody, the main focus is the team, the restaurant.
Yeah. Now, let's say, right, you follow our example, you walk in on a Friday night, you kind of see the friction, right, doesn't feel good. you sense that the vibe isn't as great as it could be, what are some things you could do or some examples you have of vibes that got better?
First thing I've always done, so I've walked in on situations like that, I walk the kitchen, I start talking.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get to the root of this because I know something's wrong. People slamming dishes, you know, you hear things getting thrown into the sink, and you're like, okay, something's not right. And I just make my walk. Usually the dishwasher knows everything, right? Because he stands in the corner, he watches everything, and he's always ready to duck. I always go over and, hey, you know, what's going on? You know, and he'll start telling you what happened.
Right.
You say, all right, so then you could go work the room a little bit and try to put this to rest and get a better vibe going. Maybe, you know, turn the radio on, get something happening. You know, that was a big thing for me. He wasn't allowed to have a radio unless I turned it on.
Right.
So Friday night, a little time, I'm going to turn that radio on, get it going. Because if it's on all the time, you can't use it that way.
Yeah.
You know, that was one of my little tricks.
Okay.
So, and it always worked. They get happy. They start, you know, singing while they're working. And okay, well, here we go. It's Friday night. You know, we're going to have a good service.
Nice.
Yeah, no pun intended. We always called them temperature checks.
Okay.
But for the staff,
Yeah.
you know, hey, I'm gonna walk over, say hi, what's going on? Very casual, but kind of get a feel for what's going on. Kind of what Chris is saying, like, let's get a little more information on how the shift's going, how are they feeling, how's it going tonight? Do you have all the you need? And you'll start kind of figuring out if there's a breakdown. You know, little things to that boost that morale is, you know, I always carry let me a bucket of candy or bring a case of Gatorades. They go a long way for some Gatorades on the line on a Saturday night at volume. So I think there are a lot of ways to kind of break that tension and do it. But again, starting with the mindset of the person doing it to they have to be the one. Otherwise, it's not going to get any better, right?
It's all mindset. The leader has to have the correct mindset to deal with all this. You know, it's not, you just don't wake up and do this. You have to prepare for it, right? How do you prepare for it? You got to make sure you prepared yourself for the day.
Yeah.
All right? You can't expect to go out there with the right mindset in the back of your mind of all the work you still have to do.
Yeah.
Or you haven't done for a week maybe.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're taking care of what you're supposed to and you have the right mindset, then you could give that to someone else.
Yeah.
And then they're going to pick up on it and they're going to have it.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think it's so important right now, like Scott said, take a temperature check, right? It's been a long few years. We're midway through this year. As we've said, we're in halftime.
Right.
So it's a really important time to take a look at where we are and to remember that you can control in your four walls more than you think. So I don't care what they say about the economy. I don't care what they say on the news, right? Turn all of that off and realize there's so much that you can control in your business with the right mindset and the right team. And if we can focus on that, you know, you can get market share. Right? There's always sales to be had. There's always customers to be had if you can work on these core elements. And I think mindset is such an important thing. So the whole homework for today's episode is to temperature check your business, right? Walk in honestly. Right? Assess it. It's not bad. Don't get mad if they have a bad temperature.
You might have walked in a bad shift. It happens.
Right. Don't make it worse. Right? It's not their fault. But we just want to really assess. And then, you know, really thinking about some of those great sports analogies of the teams that made it work. Like Scott said, it may not be the most talent that gets it done.
It's usually not.
Yeah. All right. So let's go win the week and be shot makers.